Welcome to Coastal Conversations, the weekly podcast from Coastal Church, where we explore meaningful topics that shape our daily lives as followers of Christ. In Colossians 4:6, Paul encourages us to let our conversations be full of grace and seasoned with salt so that we can respond wisely to everyone. Through this podcast, we aim to live out that calling together. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to this week's episode of Coastal Conversations. We are super excited that you are back and that you are listening. Thanks for tuning in every week. I hear from so many of you that you are enjoying these conversations and they are adding value to your life. And that just means so much to us. So thanks for listening every week. And thanks for sharing these episodes with your friends. It really does help us get the word out there that we do have this podcast that helps people, not only the people here at Coastal Church, but all over. So if there's an episode that particularly strikes a chord with you, we would just encourage you to like it and share it with your friends so that everyone can know and hear these special episodes. Well, today on our episode, you are going to be very, very encouraged. We have the executive director of the Home of Grace out of Mobile, Alabama, Miss Valerie McKinley. You are going to be so inspired by not only the story of Home of Grace, but also Miss Valerie's story of how she just became a part of Home of Grace and what she is doing now as the executive director. So help me welcome today to Coastal Conversations, my friend, Miss Valerie McKinley.
Oh, Jennifer, thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure. Always a pleasure to be with you guys.
Well, I got to be with you actually last evening and come to one of your chapel services with your 90-day girls.
Yes.
I like to call them the 90-day girls because you do have so many we're going to talk about that's already still on your campus, graduates, 90-day girls, and people that have gone through the program that are now actually serving there. But I got to be in the chapel with some of the girls that were in the 90-day program and talk to them a little bit. And it was just very moving and inspiring. It was my first time on your campus. And I told Chad when I got home, I said, when you pulled up, you can feel the Holy Spirit. You just felt him and you felt the love and you felt the grace of the Home of Grace.
Yeah.
It really,
it's part of the name, grace, that unmerited favor of God.
That's right.
And I love that it's part of our name. We have a saying at the Home of Grace that, we don't run the Home of Grace. God runs the Home of Grace. And it's so true.
Well, for our listeners that do not know about the Home of Grace, tell us a little bit about the details of it, maybe the story behind it, how it got started. Briefly tell us about its founding, who founded it, and where it is today.
Okay, so back 52 years ago, Home of Grace for Women has been in the Mobile and Baldwin areas for 52 years. We will celebrate that 52nd anniversary in September. So Doris Woods Littleton is the founder of Home of Grace for Women. And her story is that she herself never struggled with addiction at all, but she had, it was in her family, her stepfather particularly. And so in about her 40s, she was running a little daycare in her home, but God was working in incredible ways in Doris's life. And so she just had a desire to be able to help people that were struggling with addiction, having watched what had happened within her own family. And so she's down on Royal and Government Street. And she's bringing people to the Lord. They are men that would be getting off boats, men that were working at the docks, and they would come in and she would sing. She had a beautiful alto voice and just a presence and power of God in her life, just operating in a mighty way. And she would minister to people there on that platform there in downtown Mobile. But something that she would notice, and it is the case with addiction, it often has that relapse recovery cycle. And she would notice that the men would come in, they would experience the power of God in their life. And then maybe the next week they would return. They would be drunk again, they would be struggling again. So she knew that she had to get them somewhere to get them long-term help. So she began to look for other places where she could send men to get long-term help. She became acquainted with the Home of Grace in Mississippi, in Van Cleve, Mississippi, which was a recovery program for men. So she would send the men over there by bus, put them on the bus, send them over there. But God began to move on Miss Littleton's heart and she knew that there were women struggling. And she saw these men leaving and going to get help, but yet she knew in her own circle that she was moving in, there were women that were struggling. But, Jennifer, there's so much stigma attached, especially, to addiction at large, but with women. Women are supposed to be home taking care of children. They're supposed to be taking care of family. That's not supposed to happen to women.
Right.
And yet she knew that it was. The thing that she dealt with in the early years was alcoholism and Valium, which was called Mother's Little Helper, diet pills back then. And so she began to ask God, what about the women? What about the women? Well, I've come to realize in my own life, if God is stirring my heart about some need, he's probably looking at you for the answer.
That's
so
right.
What God moves us with, what our heart is moved by, that's generally where we're being called toward. And that is what happened with Miss Littleton. So she began to question God about this. She realized he was calling her to help women. And so she begins there in her home in Saraland on Cleveland Road, and she begins to bring people into her home. And she got up to about 12 or 14 ladies. Long gone was the daycare. And she was a very successful businesswoman in running this daycare. And so she gets up to about 12 or 14 ladies. Well, the neighbors did not like that she was bringing people into her home. It kind of was, they were thinking, giving it just not a good vibe there to the neighborhood. And so eventually they go to the city. The city kindly asked her to please move that work elsewhere.
Yeah.
Now, the irony of that story is years later, the same city will give Miss Littleton the key to the city for the great work that she is doing in the field of addiction.
Wow.
So she finds property out in the 8 Mile area where a former school was at, and a beautiful piece of property where you came last night. And the first investment she made was there on about 40 acres with 2 very old buildings. And so that's what we began with. Today, it's much more than that. You saw the wonderful buildings that God has blessed us with through the years.
Yeah.
And so that's the story of the very humble beginnings. And in the beginning, she was doing it all. And, she was counseling. She was, caring for the ladies. She was doing it all.
You were telling me last night that she would even stay on the property during the week and then go home on weekends to rest.
Yeah.
And then come back and just stay there. What a calling. What a woman. I would have loved to meet her.
Dedication. Everybody that I run into that says, I remember Miss Littleton, she was definitely a person that you could never forget. And personally, I could never say no to her.
Yeah.
I've been involved with the Home of Grace for 20 years. Anything she ever asked me to do, I didn't know if I could do it, but you were going to figure out a way to do it. She had that way about her that whenever she asked you to do something, you just almost considered it a mandate from God.
Well, how long have you been serving at Home of Grace, and where did you start there?
Okay, well, I'm a former businesswoman here in Mobile. My background is an accountant. Yeah. And I worked with some of the staff here that you now have in some of their church accounting and all before. But so my background was in accounting, and God blessed us, enabled us to sell our business sometime in my 40s. And I was asked to go on the board there at the Home of Grace. I had some extra time. I'm like, God, what is the next part of my journey here in life? And I knew Miss Littleton because Miss Littleton was out of my home church. Excuse me. She was out of my home church. So, of course, I knew her. I could remember in my 20s being, having the solo on a Sunday morning and it being a Sunday that the Home of Grace ladies were going to come and be with us. And if the Home of Grace was going to be there, you knew it was going to be a power-packed service because those ladies know how to worship. Because when you've been delivered from that much,
that's right,
man, the praise that they can just exude because they have been brought through so much. And so, as I knew about her, early on, I just began to feel this tremendous pull toward the Home of Grace. And my personal background is that my own sister struggled with addiction. And despite that we had the same parents, and that's your genetics, despite that we had the same privileged upbringing, my sister still fell into addiction.
Wow.
And so, I had that. that just made me feel that pull toward the Home of Grace. So when someone asked me to come and be on the board there and lend some of my financial knowledge there, I said yes. It wasn't a hard thing to say yes. So I served on the board for about 16 years, but somewhere during that 16 years, Miss Littleton looked at me one day and said, "Hey, I need you down there at the counselor's office." And I'm like, "Miss Littleton, I help you with finances. I'm not a counselor." I didn't realize she was calling out that next part of my life. So I was back in school getting my master's. I said, "God, if this is the direction you want me to go, here I go." So I went back to school, got my master's in human services, became a certified recovery addiction counselor, internationally certified, but within the state of Alabama. And so God was just calling me to the next level of my life.
That's amazing. And then when she passed the torch, did she pass it before she passed away, or did you become the executive director? How did that all come about?
Yeah, that's kind of a funny story because Miss Littleton was very much the executive director all the way till the day Jesus called her home.
Wow.
The last week that she was alive, even though she was at home by that time, she was still calling the office, making sure that she was still, everyone knew that she was the executive director of the Home of Grace.
She was still in charge.
It was very much her baby, that she had birthed. And although she always gave 100%. God the glory, it was the thing. It was her life's calling. So yeah, it wasn't something that happened until after she passed away. And myself and Pam Person there in our office, we co-directed for a year. She's now the administrative director, and I'm the executive director there. So I've been the executive director for 2 years this past month.
That is amazing. That is a great story. How many girls do you guys currently serve there at the Home of Grace?
Well, I'll tell you the programs that we offer, if that's okay.
Yeah,
and then I'll tell you kind of how that maps out there. We have a 90-day program where ladies come in. That's our basic program. And on that, we run an average of about 20, 25 ladies on that. Now, that's about half the numbers that we have run in the past, but that's due to the fact that we were the only thing at one time on this coast. I mean, if a woman wanted to go somewhere for recovery, then they generally, through the court system or self-admit, they were going to go to the Home of Grace for Women. But today, thankfully, we have a lot more places that people have options that they can go to. And so we run about 25 on our 90-day program. In addition to that, we have a 1-year program. And on that 1-year program, they're able to work jobs. They're able to get back out in the community. They're able to have visits with their children. We have limited family housing there where they can have their children all the time. That's very limited. We want to be able to do more of that, hopefully in the near future, and build more there where we're at to accommodate the many ladies that need help with family housing. Because here's the thing that we know, the statistics recovery, they're not really good. I mean, nationwide, less than 10% are going to go on to sustained recovery.
Wow.
Who wants to work in a field like that where less than 10%? But I say that's the nationwide statistics.
Yeah.
You add the God factor in there, you're talking about a whole different set of statistics. And Home of Grace is a faith-based recovery program.
That's right.
We don't receive state funding. So we're able to have a complete faith-based program there. So that 90-day program, that's just the basic of what someone needs. 30 days is not enough. So 90-day residential recovery program is what we offer. And then in addition to that, the 1-year program. The other programs that we have is we have an alumni program where ladies can come back, be a part of that. We also have an aftercare program where ladies can come back and participate in meetings on campus. But one of our newest ads of last September is that we offer an outpatient program. And that has been a tremendous ad. I forgot to tell you about that last night. But the reason why we saw that need for outpatient is there are so many times that a lady cannot come in. She can't come into residential treatment. Maybe she has children. Maybe she has a job. We've had college kids that stop by and say, I'm going to lose my scholarship, but I know I need help. And so they know they need that help. So we're able to custom design a program for someone through the outpatient.
That is so amazing. So you went through all that. So right now with all of those programs, about how many women are you serving? Do you know that number specific?
Probably about 75 on
that's
average
amazing.
A month that are working through the program in some capacity.
What are you seeing more of these days in terms of addiction? What should we be aware of? Like, what are you seeing? Because you said before, like when it started, it was mommy's little helper, that little pill, Valium or whatever they took. But now, like, what are you seeing more of?
Yeah, and of course, mom's little helper became the Xanax today, which is the more potent. Excuse me, potent form of benzo. Our wonderful allergy weather here in the South. So the main thing that we are seeing, that's the scary thing that makes it a little different with what we do today, is the fact that fentanyl is in almost everything.
You were telling me that last night. So explain that a little bit more, because you were saying last night how these girls come in and you have to test them and they're like, well, I'm just doing marijuana or I'm just doing this. And then you test them and fentanyl is in everything. They're like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
How is fentanyl in there?
Complete shock. Now, that's sadly people are getting the word, that, it's on almost everything. The weed the weed of today is not the weed of your mom and dad, or, a couple of generations back. It's not the same. There's a lot of the marijuana that can be laced with fentanyl. But even your meth today, people come in and they think they're only using meth, but it's laced with fentanyl. And then so many of the younger ones that come in now, it's straight fentanyl use. A lot of the pills that they're getting today, they're pressed pills with fentanyl in it. So that's the scary thing that we deal with today, because it's such a powerful and potent drug.
Yeah.
I mean, in comparison to, the past things like heroin, it's micro amounts.
And you were telling me last night when we were talking that there's the wide spectrum of ladies that come in. So you have the poorest of the poor, but then you have the most privileged of girls that come in.
Yeah.
So it's really affecting.
Drugs is not a respecter of persons. But neither is Jesus, we tell the girls.
Amen. That's right. And I loved that you told me when you intake them, they go through a detox room or situation. They have to stay there for a few days. And you've never lost a patient.
Never lost anybody. To God be the glory. There's really no explanation for that, because it does happen. I mean, it does happen.
Because they're coming off of so many things. Can you share a success story with us about somebody that you've seen maybe that just stands out to you, that is what the Home of Grace is all about, that's been a success?
Wow. Can I give you two? Because I just want to give you the disparity between the two types of situations that you can have come in. And this is a reason, of course, we won't give any names. This has been in the last couple of years. We had two cases. They just happened to be there at the same time. And it was just the reminder to me that drugs is no respecter of persons. And so one of these was a local physician's granddaughter. And you look at that, a life of privilege, just everything, how does this person fall into that? Because sometimes we think, oh no, drugs, that happens to people that live under bridges and things, but that's not true. It doesn't have one particular face. An addict does not have one particular face. It can be the person you're sitting next to on the pew at church, and they are there. And so the other person that was there around the same time literally was like your person that was living homeless just here in our local area. And so the differences in those two people, and yet you watch those two different types of people that come through, and this is there all the time on our campus. These just two stick out my mind. And you watch them go through the program, and you watch them as they are given the tools that they need to succeed and to overcome addiction. And when they embrace, first of all, when they embrace Christ, they'll never have to do recovery alone again. And that's why that's so key and the key component of everything.
Foundational. Right.
We're considered a holistic program because we're dealing with addiction on the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual arena.
Right.
Yeah. We tell the girls, if you don't deal with your addiction in every one of those areas, you will fail. You will relapse. But in those two stories, did both of those stories have success rates? Absolutely.
Mm.
Both of those girls, one of them has went on to be married, is expecting a baby now. The other one is on staff with us. The girl that was
Wow.
living homeless, incredibly brilliant, smart, has such compassion and love for the ladies. And she is now on our staff.
Wow.
And God has blessed her in incredible, unimaginable ways, even financially. And I've watched as she has continued to give back to others in need. And when she walked through the doors of the Home of Grace, we don't turn people away. I mean, do we have a fee? Yes, we do. But we try to never turn anybody away that is truly wanting recovery. We'll find it somewhere.
Yeah.
And that girl didn't have when she came in. And yet her story today is incredible.
That is
two
amazing.
stories.
Two stories.
Amazing.
Yeah. And God did a work in both of them. That is amazing. I love that. Well, if we know somebody struggling with addiction, like you said, they may be sitting beside us. They may be somebody that we interact with every day. As a friend or a family member, what should we do?
Love them. Love them. But when we say that, sometimes people don't know exactly what that looks like. I happened to listen to your podcast with Jody the other day. And Jody said, saying, I know her. And she said something she talks about how that it takes her family just saying, I mean, we're not doing this with you anymore. We're not, you are on your
enabling
own.
her, right?
That enabling. I cannot tell you the clients, when I was doing my counseling years there at the Home of Grace, that would say, oh, if my family, my husband, my kids, my loved ones, whoever it was that was the enabler, if they would have just let me get to the end of myself. That is so hard because sometimes, and I know with my own sister, you think, oh, I've got to be there, but what if they die? But what if something happens to them? What if they overdose? What if as long as they know there's an out, the pattern is going to be, it's going to continue. And so you love them, but what that looks like, you've got to really think about that. You know, the family really needs, the people that are involved with the people with the addiction, they really need as much support as the person going through addiction.
Yeah.
And that's where I found myself with my sister. If I would have known the things today, when my sister was going through her years of addiction, I'll look back and think, look, I could have been so much of a better help. Because when I took her to Bradford, she happened to go through Bradford. When I took her up there and they said, we are going to want you to come back because we want to do a class for family and we want you to understand some things about addiction. And my reaction was, wait, I'm a business person. I'm trying to run a business. I'm trying to get her into treatment here. And my head nodded yes. But inside I was going, you have got to be kidding me. Right. I'm not the one with the problem. She is.
Yeah.
But it is the family disease. It is a disease that affects the whole family. So our family was being affected. And I'm sure Jody would attest to that too, as her family walked through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So love them, stop enabling them. And that requires help. That requires assistance. So it's like you said, that family member, that friend, maybe they need to go seek out counseling, seek out a person, a group, you know, that teaches you how to do that the right way.
And y'all are doing that here.
Yeah, we do.
I cannot tell
Celebrate
you the people
recovery.
that go to celebrate recovery, that they're not the addict, they're the family.
Yes.
And they get the help that they need even before the addict, maybe the addict's not ready, but them getting the help they need is so good because they're going to hear things like this that we're talking about.
That's really good. Is there anything else about the Home of Grace that you didn't mention today that you wanted to, other than we just need to be in prayer for it? And this month here at Coastal, we are our greater emphasis. We like to emphasize like things we give to throughout the year. And one of the things is the Home of Grace that we're emphasizing this month, along with Women's Care Medical and Project Rescue.
Yes,
so leading up to Mother's Day, we're kind of emphasizing a lot of the women's things that we give to throughout the year. And so that's why I wanted to have you on, just to raise awareness that I knew it was always out there, but man, when you visit and when you see it in action, what a blessing. And it's literally, you know, you said it's in the 8 Mile area. It's like a little slice of heaven right there in it.
Yeah.
It's like this just
right there close to the University of Mobile, Sarah Lynn, we're kind of situated.
It's just protective dome right there of these ladies. And it's just so beautiful. So just raising awareness today on the podcast to help people understand what it is that it does and the gift that it is to our community and to the ladies that are there. Is there anything else you would like to share about it?
Well, we tell people we hope you never need us.
Mm-hmm.
I sincerely hope that people never need us, but when they do, just raising that awareness that we're here. We do only take ladies 18 and older. Mm-hmm. Our most recent client was 72. So we have a wide, span of ages and all that we serve there. So again, we try to never turn anyone away. Our funding comes from churches, individuals. We recently actually received some of the opioid funding that we hear about that is going up because thankfully this time faith-based was not,
excluded.
We weren't excluded from that funding. And so we did receive, some from that, but it's always a struggle. It's always a struggle, but God always provides. And so we just want to be able to help as many people as we can find the freedom that they can have in Christ, the freedom that they can have from addiction. Yeah. This Littleton knew that if she could help a woman find recovery, then she had the hopes of helping that entire family. And that's the case generally with the women. You got children that are involved. So returning people back to their faith, back to their family, back to their communities. That is our goal.
That's so good. Well, we always like to come to a fun last question here on the podcast. And we just want to know, what is your favorite thing, one of your favorite things that you think needs to be on our radar? It maybe needs to be our favorite thing. It can be a book, a podcast, a restaurant, a food. What is one of your favorite things that needs to be our favorite thing?
Okay, probably someone just gave me this book back the other day because I've just read this, but I'm an avid reader. It's just one of my favorite. That's my hobby, is reading information,
Yes.
But I recently read John Mark Comer's The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Okay, so it has been on my list, but I have not listened to. I read it.
You have to read this. For a long time, I am a firm believer, and I know that people teach this everywhere, but hey, I'm getting older now. So, I have time to ponder these things and look back. But I was very busy. I was a very busy business person. And I believe that busyness is such a tool of the enemy.
Wow.
And, busyness and sin really cause the same thing. It causes us to drift from God, because we'll find ourselves in a place where we don't feel that connection and closeness with God. And so working to not be busy, working to simplify our lives. And so I got so much out of that book. I mean, it was like it just spoke directly to me. And it was that reminder. We have to simplify. We have to focus on the important things in life. And we can get a lot done in the kingdom of God, but we've got to simplify. We got to focus on those things that God wants us to be about. Whatever our callings are, at this time in my life, I have to be focused on Home of Grace. I have 4 beautiful grandchildren.
You do.
I tried, they are a focal part of my life, And so we have to look at those things that are important in our life and just eliminate all the hurry. We live in such a hurried world. So great book. I would recommend
Ruthless
that to
Elimination of Hurry.
John
Mark Comer.
Yes.
Okay. Incredible. It is on my list. I just haven't gotten to it. It's like every time I get to the top of my list and I'm about to read it, something else comes in and I'm like, I'm going to read
this. You got to stop the hurry. Yeah.
So
eliminate all that.
Eliminate that and focus on that one. It will be, I know that Marissa and Sean that are with us that help produce our show, they've read both of it. They're big John Mark Comer fans, I think. So they've read it as well. So it is on our list. We'll put it in the show notes so people can find it and maybe order it. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Miss Val, for being here today. Me. You are a blessing to us. You're a blessing to our community. I know you're a blessing to all those ladies there at Home of Grace and what you guys do. It's Jesus' work. It is Jesus' work there.
It is.
And we are excited as Coastal Church members to be a part of it through our giving. Thanks for being here today.
Thank
you for listening to Coastal Conversations today. We're going to be right back here next week with a brand new episode for you. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for listening to this week's Coastal Conversations podcast. All of today's references will be found in the show notes. Also, if you enjoyed listening, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll see you at Coastal this Sunday as we pick the conversation up from here.